Welcome to The Hidden Gem, your go-to podcast that shines a spotlight on the strategic role of marketing and communications in shaping the future of community colleges. I'm your host, Maya Demishkevich, CMO at Carroll Community College. Every week, I sit down with community college leaders and industry experts to unpack strategies that work. We'll discuss practical insights and success stories to help you elevate your institution's profile and achieve your strategic goals. Tune in to amplify your community college's success, one conversation at a time. The Hidden Gem is part of the Enrollment network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. And let's get started. Welcome back to The Hidden Gem. I'm excited to welcome Marcus Hanscom to the episode today to chat about inbound marketing. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks for having me, Maya.
So I know inbound marketing, I think, in my opinion, is the term that many people don't understand and it's not used a lot. So I think if I approached a college president or maybe an admissions leader and I said, hey, I want to invest in inbound marketing, they would be like, what? What is this? So why don't we start by talking about what it is and maybe describe it in a way that might resonate with leadership at the college so they understand the benefits and why they should consider investing in inbound marketing.
Sure. Yeah, it's often misunderstood, and there's no elevator pitch. So I know when you and I talked about this before, I was like, how do we get this into a 30-second soundbite? And it's hard to do that. But inbound, when you think about traditional marketing is more interruptive. It's like if you go with a megaphone, or you think about those guys that are swinging the arrows on the sidewalk, and they're just kind of interruptive. They're not meeting you at a place that you're ready for that experience. Maybe you're not even thinking about schools, but somebody's there waving the flag and saying, hey, think about this thing. And you can get fairly targeted with much of the digital tools that are available to us now. So even with Facebook and, think about Meta as in general, I can say I want to just target all the 20-year-olds that have an associate's degree within 30 miles of my campus that have a part-time job. Like we can do that kind of level of targeting and put an ad in front of them because we think it might be relevant to them. Whereas inbound instead is, think of it like a magnet. So if traditional digital marketing is like yelling through a megaphone and hoping people listen, and maybe you're yelling at the right people, but instead with inbound, you're kind of using a magnet to draw them in based on things that they're looking for. So am I searching for something on Google like, what can I do with an associate's degree in healthcare administration, right? Or why should I get an associate's degree at all? Answering questions that are very relevant to that exact search at that point in time, where students are saying, I have a concern or a fear or a need, and then how can you position your school to be answering that need? So instead of just waving a flag and hoping people are looking at it, you're instead positioning something in front of somebody when they're ready for it. And that's ultimately where inbound helps them then draw them through that experience. And the digital marketing that happens in a traditional way is more like, learn more about what we have to offer, request more information, apply now. Whereas inbound is more like, here, download this guide to why you need an associate's degree, or read these blogs that are the value of going to community college over a traditional four-year education. Things that really draw those students in when they're ready for it. And the relevancy of that content is there. It's not just spray and pray as some of that traditional marketing can be.
I think I like your comparison. I think it clearly describes the difference between traditional or digital advertising and inbound marketing. Another term that comes to mind when you say inbound marketing is content marketing. And I think there's another misunderstanding because people use those words interchangeably very often. So could you tell us the difference in your experience?
We always poke fun at schools that use like PR as content. You think about content marketing. We can write an article about our latest U.S. News and World Report ranking, or how well our students did in the latest mock trial, or the jobs that they got when they graduated. That's all great content, but is it very relevant to what students need and what they're asking about? So when you think about a prospective student, let's say a 22-year-old student who needs further education to advance in the role that they're in, they're starting to go to Google and ask questions and things. And they might go to your website, and if they land there and they read, "Oh, U.S. News and World Reports," well, that sounds nice. That shows that there's some caliber and quality to the place that I'm considering. But does it really tell me much? Whereas Inbound is creating this kind of web and foundation of various content that meets students at all levels of stages of their search. One thing that I learned when I moved to the agency side after being an institutional side for more than 17 years, I wasn't thinking a lot, at least as an admissions person, about awareness, consideration, and decision, things that are very common in sales terminology and marketing. That was all kind of foreign to me. But when you think about the buyer journey, and I know the higher ed doesn't like buyer and sales. Those words are not really, they're kind of dirty words in higher ed. But when you think about students making a buying decision, and even at the community college level, maybe it's less money overall than a 4-year education, but it's still a significant investment of money and time for students. So this is a big buying purchase, right? And so as they're making that decision, they're not ready to jump from I'm just learning about it to now I'm going to apply and I'm going to be right there. You need to meet me where I'm looking to go at the stage that I'm at. And I might not be ready for that marriage proposal on the first date. That's what I run into a lot, where schools are just so much about apply now, request more information. And students are like, whoa, I'm just trying to figure out if I should even consider college, right? So if you think about awareness, consideration, decision, awareness being that I'm just thinking about what I might want to do. And I don't know who offers it. I don't know where I want to go. I don't know how much I want to spend even. I'm out there looking. Whereas consideration stage, okay, I'm aware of the options that are available to me. So I'm going to start narrowing down my search. So maybe those 20 schools that I thought about, now I'm thinking about 5. So I'm considering 5. I'm going to do a deeper dive. Maybe I'll request more information and I'll get some more deeper information and go to events and maybe talk to an admissions counselor. The decision stage then is those students getting them over the finish line. And schools have varying levels of how they do this, but it's considering to apply. And so the decision is actually moving forward and making an action to say, I'm interested in moving forward at the school, and they're applying, getting a decision, ultimately enrolling. Or it's the decision process of actually yielding them from, okay, I've been admitted, but how do I get over the finish line to actually enroll the student? And so we have to think about content and Inbound as a whole. How do we make all of our content pieces fit into those 3 kind of core stages for students and help them take action? And I think one word that I want to make sure people think about when they think about inbound marketing is conversion. There's a lot of content that you can just throw it out there. It's news. It's good to hear about, but it's not asking me to do anything. It's informative, but it's not asking me to take an action. So how Inbound instead positions all these things at various stages, as we just talked about. But as you get to the end of that document, or as you're reading through a guide, you have links to other things. You have links to a related blog or to another guide, or, hey, if this sounds really good, our program at this community college offers that. So why don't you request more information or go to our program page? So it's always connecting students across this web of things that we've built. It's not just a static, here's 5 books to read them all and you'll be ready to go. It's like, all right, we get these 5 kind of guides, but then you unify across 20 different blogs and all these actions on your site and going to events and engaging with advisors. There's never what we call a dead end. There's always a link to take further action.
In essence, inbound marketing is a strategy that includes content marketing and includes creating valuable content for different stages of the student buying journey and distributing it in a way where they can easily find it, access this information, and have a clear call to action, positioning your institution as one of the choices for them to consider. So it doesn't always have to be the only choice, right? Because the goal of content marketing and inbound marketing is to educate and to help students make the right decision for them.
Yes.
Keeping in mind your institution, of course, right?
Yeah. That's a far more concise explanation than I provided, but yes, that's it.
Well, sometimes context is important, right? To
Of course.
understanding the whole picture. Okay, so let's say You have an option to do paid advertising, but you can also invest in inbound marketing. Can you talk about the benefits of inbound marketing versus paid advertising?
Yeah, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Right.
Oftentimes you're incorporating both. And so what we find is when we do digital ads, so many schools are just kind of married to that idea that we just have to put ads in the marketplace. They have to be on Meta, we have to be on Google, and we
Hmm.
have to spend a lot of money to do it. And especially when you're bidding for keywords, let's say in business, for example, they're always more expensive than the average in other disciplines. So you're investing a lot of money in there. And if you're not very targeted, or you're just putting out what we call offers that are request more information or apply now, students are like, I'm not ready for the marriage proposal. So they don't take any action at all because those are the only offers that they're being provided. So you need to give them other ways to engage with you. So in your digital ads, instead of just those two, request more information, apply now, maybe it's download a guide, or it's attend these events, or take our interactive quiz that we've developed. So it's sending them to other things, and they inevitably are significantly less expensive because students are taking action on them on a regular basis. So your cost per lead is much lower when you have these content offers, that things that students go, huh, they've got that guide about going to community college. That would really be helpful for me to download. They might not care who it's providing, but it's the guide that's helpful. So then they're willing to go there, and then you gate that content. So rather than just having them go to your website and you're building awareness, running a traffic ad on Meta, you're instead getting them to go and download a guide, take an action. They might provide their name and email address in exchange for receiving that, and they're more likely to do that rather than just, oh, I'm signing up for a mailing list, I'm going to get a lot of emails now, maybe phone calls. I'm instead putting my email in knowing that I'm going to get a tangible from in response to that. So paid advertising has to be part of your overall strategy, but how you use the paid advertising is really where schools need to think differently. And you can leverage a vendor like ours, but you don't have to do that. If you develop your own content internally and you're able to do a gated form and provide means to get those things, and you run your own ads, those ads can be going to that resource and they download the resource. And then it's important to build some sort of mechanism, if you have a CRM or otherwise, that has an automated drip or some sort of flag to your advisors to reach out to a student and say, hey, Maya, I know you downloaded our guide. I want to follow up and see if I can help you. Those types of things are really valuable. And we always talk about in terms of, I had to laugh when I came to DD. They used to say, like, oh, it's going to be a tofu plan. I'm like, why on earth are we talking about tofu? Well, we're talking about top of funnel, middle of the funnel, so MOFU, or bottom of funnel, BOFU. And they kind of loosely fit into the awareness consideration decision that we were talking about before. And those tofu level, top funnel students, they aren't ready to be sold to yet. They're maybe downloading content that's totally agnostic to your brand. You're providing it to them. So, what's the value in a community college education, for example? But maybe just at the end, they might learn, like, oh, my college offers this. I used to live near Gateway Community College in New Haven. So, all right, Gateway offers X number of healthcare programs that you might be interested in. Why don't you take further action? So there's some sort of connection to them there. But beyond that, the piece itself is not a sales pitch about Gateway. It's just like, what about community colleges? And so those students, you engage with them maybe with a light communication flow, maybe connect them to other blogs and other things, that those in turn have other calls to action that eventually get them to learn more. And then when they learn more, then they become mid funnel and they get engaged with your admission staff and so on. So the types of action you take really depend on the types of ads that you're driving to and the content that you're providing, and ultimately the communication that you want to have with students.
Hmm. I'm glad you mentioned that this strategy can be implemented in house. So I know a lot of community colleges might not have the resources to outsource or hire someone. So let's kind of walk through the steps on how they might approach uh, developing inbound strategy in house and creating the content that they need. What are the first steps?
I think the thing I would start with is your personas and identifying who are your target audiences. And
Hmm.
some schools have very clear personas, some do not, but making the time to go through that exercise. You mentioned employers are another target audience, particularly for community colleges. So if you're thinking about students as one group and employers as another, most of my experience is in graduate schools. And the graduate schools, I always laugh because you'd have undergraduate programs that traditional 4 year, they think of, oh, it's an 18-year-old, they're coming right out of high school, they have all similar needs. It's kind of the rite of passage. They're going to go to 4 year education for most of them. And so they assume the whole enterprise operates the same way, which is not true for your audience as a community colleges, not true for my graduate education. So I would have singular programs. So let's say my MBA, and I'd have four personas for that program. I'd have my international students, I'd have my non-traditional working audience, I'd have people looking for personal enrichment that might even be retirees, and then I'd have the traditional 22-year-old that just graduated from undergrad. And so I had to educate my institution on, I have four personas on one program, and you multiply that over by the 20 programs that we have, it really gets unruly quickly. And I think that's why a lot of schools are like, oh, we're not going to do that. But I think it's really an important exercise to sit down and say, okay, if my community college, let's say student audience is, I'm going to keep it simple, but like a traditional younger student, maybe they're not ready for a 4-year experience. They would want to go to a 2-year to kind of get their gen eds out of the way. So maybe they're coming out of a high school and they're 18, 19 years old. Or you've got people that are working and they need an additional education to grow or maybe switch careers. So that's another audience. So developing those personas and then asking the key questions that are going to be relevant for those personas. And I start with things like, what are their aspirations? What are they worried about? What are their biggest concerns? What are their needs from a day to day? Some people, it's as simple as I need to be able to put food on the table for my family, and the job I have isn't cutting it. Other people, it's like I need to totally switch careers, and I can't do it without some sort of formal education. So when you think about those, and then start building out what content can I include here that address all of those questions. So I gave you some of the kind of easy ones, but things like what kinds of financial aid are available to me as a community college student? There's a lot talked about in the 4 years. I'm sure the 2 years, there's not a lot written about that. Similarly with grad schools. Um, what kind of commitment is it? Can I juggle a job and going to school? Do I consider online education? Is online education bad? People ask about the validity of an online versus in person. So there's a lot of things that you could be answering for these students that are otherwise really worried about it. And it might alleviate some of your staff time who are otherwise answering those questions. You also should try to inform that a little bit. There are tools out there that we use from when you think about search engine optimization. I know probably a lot of your audience is at least broadly familiar with that term. But thinking about how your content on your website helps your site rank when students are searching on Google. So we'll keep it simple. They go to Google and they type in, what can I do with a community college education? And you want to make sure that you're in the top 5 results there. So your page and your content needs to be optimized so that the crawlers see that you're answering that question effectively for those prospective students and ultimately coming up in those search strings. So that's a really important piece of this that schools may not be fully thinking about. But as you are trying to develop content, you have the one side where I'm answering questions. I know what the needs are of those personas we talked about. But the other is, what do we know from data that says people are searching for these things? And that's kind of where, if you take those two things together, that's where the gold is for your school. And so you can use tools like SEMrush or Moz. Those are SEO tools that allow you to do some keyword research. I mean, even the keyword planner on Google that's free, that's a good starting point. Just figure out where you're seeing their students searching volume for, if there's key terms and things. And then you want to optimize your content for those terms. And ideally, you're creating things that are both answering questions that you think your audiences want, but also you know for sure the data supporting that they're searching for. And then you're getting some, hopefully, traffic to your site that's answering those questions.
Right.
AI powered and people focused. This is the future of higher ed. Join us in Charlotte, June 24 and 25 for the 2025 Engage Summit. Learn how AI transforms student engagement by blending scalability and authenticity. Enrollify listeners get 50% off with code Enrollify50. That's Enrollify50. Register now at engage.element451.com.
And I think data is important in helping you prioritize because students are asking a lot of questions. So you could look at which are the most important questions, which ones have a lot of impressions, maybe where are you ranking for those keywords to help you prioritize which ones to start with. And I'm so glad you mentioned personas as a starting point because I feel like this step is often skipped. And I believe that if you have great personas, it's going to make your job as a marketer so much easier. So much easier. You can take a persona, and that's what I usually do is work with your internal stakeholders, collect the data, develop personas, and then I create almost like a table where at the top you have your funnel. So it's awareness, consideration, decision, delight, right? And then under each one, for each persona, you start brainstorming ideas.
Mm-hmm.
What are the questions? What are the topics? What can we create? And then again, you can leverage tools like ChatGPT and other generative AI to help you brainstorm those ideas. And another thing that I found is once I did those exercises at my institution, I heard those who participated say, wow, that was the most insightful exercise we've done in a long time because it uncovers so much information that's useful not just for marketing, but also for product development. How can we better serve students? Any retention things that we can consider to help those personas persist and stay at the college. So, if you haven't done a personas exercise, I encourage you to consider it because I think it's the first step that will set you up for success.
It empowers your stakeholders to make decisions that are not just based on gut. You actually can do data informed decision making, God forbid. But I remember in my institutional side of things, being on the administrative side, as I'm sure you can relate, and it might be different at the community colleges a little bit, but there was a lot of us and them that went on between administrators and faculty. And I found that one of the biggest olive branches that I was able to provide to them was the data on their students. Who's actually selecting our program, who's sitting in our classes, and who's graduating. Now, they had a hunch on who that was, but to be able to hand over like a map of where our students are coming from, and average age and their gender and what their needs were and how they were finding out about us and the questions that they were having, all of a sudden the faculty were like, whoa, this is amazing. And from that, it's like it clicked like overnight. All of a sudden the faculty were excited and couldn't wait to be part of what we were trying to do. They wanted to inform our marketing. They wanted to know what was happening. So it was just like a light switch. All of a
Mhm.
sudden they really just dialed in with just a little bit of data. So it's a good olive branch if you want to think about how you can smooth that relationship a little bit.
Yeah. So we started talking a little bit about generative AI, but I'm curious from your perspective, how can colleges leverage ChatGPT and other tool in content creation, and what are some of the things they might need to be careful about or consider as they create this type of content?
Well, a lot goes back to your website. And I know we were
Hmm.
just talking about SEO. I don't want to beat SEO to death, but it's so important to have accurate information for one, but quality information on your sites. And so many websites are just dumping catalog copy on their program pages. And I know there's a tug of war sometimes on faculty want to own their program pages. Administrators shouldn't, and marketing
Hmm.
shouldn't have their hands in it. And you just end up getting into this messy thing that just doesn't help anybody, and it hurts
Hmm.
your enrollments in the long run. So I always encourage, especially top down, if you can have administrative leadership, when you think about presidents and cabinets, if you can have a top down initiative, our website is a marketing tool first and foremost. And that needs to be think about walking by a storefront. I'm sure you've used that. We've all used that analogy. But if you have your storefront and it looks messy or it's not helpful to get students there, poor user experience, all these things that hurt the students when they come to your website because they can't get the information they want, but it also hurts the crawlers when you're trying to get SEO value and ultimately the bots that are trying to populate AI. And think about Gemini, which is the one populating that top real estate on Google.
Hmm.
You need to have something that's very structurally sound on your website. Have very linear outlines, clear on headers, things as like an H1 tag versus H2s, and the body text that you're using, the keywords that you're using, all those things that I think a lot of schools overlook. They have significant value not only in Google rankings but in AI. And
Hmm.
you notice, especially in Gemini, that they are actually sourcing. And I think this is a more recent push because there was a lot of talk about attribution in the past for AI when it first kind of got hot. But now they're sourcing them. So you see, like, okay, here's the answer to your question, and here's the link to that source on where we got it from. And there was concern when AI really started taking off and Gemini was coming up at the top of results and all that, oh, students will just read that and then they'll leave. And I think there's I think it's working in our favor. There's some collective skepticism, like, okay, this sounds good, but is it right? And there's been a number of examples of how AI has gotten it wrong because they're using the wrong source for whatever reason. And so students and general users are clicking that link that's the source to the thing that they're reading about. So they're still ending up on your site. And ultimately, you want to be the site that is the source that's coming up there and driving student traffic. So having good structured information that's relevant, and relevancy, I'm always blown away at how schools miss the boat on relevancy sometimes. It's just there's so much of I don't know if it's the kind of academic ivory tower that we think like these are the things that students have to know about. It's the catalog copy approach kind of thing. Whereas, do students care about these things that we're saying? Because there's always that tug of war between, I think they should care about this thing versus the thing they actually care about. And when you think about students taking action, and we talked about conversions, you really need to have the content that's jazzy and exciting for students. It's going to make them take that next step. If you need to provide logistical information, specifics about curriculum credits and specific courses and logistics of what you need when you start the program later, great. You can put that in bottom funnel communications. You can put that in yield communications. You can put that in orientation. But you don't need to fully load all of that heavy encyclopedic like catalog stuff as a student's first learning about your programs. So if you kind of pivot that and think, my first order of business here is to get somebody excited about what we offer, that's going to be a great starting point. And then you move from there.
One thing I'm taking away from this and encouraging others to do the same is go to Google, go to ChatGPT, go to other generative AI tools and type in your college name. Type in different names of the programs and location of your college and see what comes up. And then you'll know what to do and where the gaps might be or what information is coming up incorrectly. But keep in mind that more and more people are using those tools. So now you need to keep in mind not only what they see on Google and Bing and other search engines, but also what shows up in tools like ChatGPT. So try that exercise. Let me know how it goes. Speaking of AI, it's so easy now to generate content, right? You can just go to ChatGPT and say, I have this persona. Can you tell me what are the top 5 things they need to know about college? Now put this into a guide and then just copy paste, go to Canva, quickly design it, upload to your website, and you're done. What are the risks of doing something like this?
Well, what we're learning is Google in particular, but I'm sure the others are getting very adept at identifying AI generated content. And especially if it's very similar and it's going to be kind of carbon copy, you're going to start seeing that same exercise that 10 schools are doing. And now there's 5 reasons to go to community college on 10 sites, and they all look very cookie cutter. So that's going to actually hurt your SEO value. So we always encourage to use ChatGPT is a good tool from a resource and bandwidth standpoint. We know that institutions are not flush with staff and resources and dollars and all the things. So and I had 2 people in my graduate office that were administratively supporting students. So we had to use things like ChatGPT, but it should be a stepping stone to get you there. Use that as a starting point rather than you don't have to sit there and spend hours like, what can I think of and write this thing from scratch? But maybe you can get it to a point that's halfway there. And then you massage it with things that are very relevant to your school. Maybe you change brand and tone. A lot of schools have very specific language they like to use. So you can't just copy and paste from ChatGPT anyway. But getting that to be kind of personalized, and as I'm sure you know, and your listeners know, you can kind of train ChatGPT to get used to your tone of voice and the things that you would say, and you can massage that and go through multiple iterations of the same text. You might get those 5 things and say, all right, change that number 2 or change this number 4. So you could actually massage a lot of it in ChatGPT, and it's not just the first response that they had, but you've trained it. And if you do it well, prompt engineering is such an important skill. And I'm sure I know a lot of your shows on Enrollify talk about these things, and artists and the others at Element are really big on that. So how can you get really adept at building a strong ChatGPT understanding of your voice and the things that you want? And then when you go and prompt it with something like, I need 5 reasons to consider community college, they maybe know a bit about your school. It knows about you. It knows about your brand voice. So the thing that it spits out isn't cookie cutter. And I think if you prompt it appropriately, that's one of the best ways to avoid just this same, copy and paste that a lot of schools are inevitably doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have any maybe success stories or examples to kind of illustrate the power of inbound marketing and what it can actually do for the institution?
Some of our best results that we've seen are from a cost perspective, which I think back my own space, and I think similarly community colleges are in the same way, that we didn't have millions of dollars to advertise our programs. We had a very finite amount of dollars to do that, and we had growing enrollment goals every year. So we were asked to do more with no additional resources, and I've heard that ad nauseum with so many schools. So an inbound approach and things that we've seen are something like, okay, I was spending $500,000 before doing an inbound approach, and I was just doing that spray and pray marketing. And let's say I got 750 students for that. Well, what if you can get 750 students for 200,000 or even 100,000? So we've had tangible examples like that with the work that we've done. Now, granted, we're doing a holistic inbound approach. We're using HubSpot as a backend. So there's a lot of reasons that engine works really well, and you're putting a lot of resources behind it. And that might be cost prohibitive to your listeners. But as you create content like this, I think where you can see a lot of value is it takes time off of your staff. So many times, I can't remember how many times I would be angry at my, over the years in admissions, how many students have to ask me how much tuition is or how many credits this program is. It's right on the website, so all these things that are seemingly obvious that, some students just don't know where to find that information, or they don't understand it, or they think there's something we're hiding from them, whatever that reason is. I think there's ways that you can use inbound to fill in those gaps. Give them the guides, give them the information. Maybe you need a guide to just how do you evaluate a good program for you or a good institution for you? What are the questions you should ask? What things you should look for? I know when I worked with grad students, they didn't know how to price their programs. They would be like, oh, isn't it just a semester cost like undergrad? No, for most of the grad schools, it's not. It's you take your number of credits you're taking times the credit hour. And oh, by the way, the credit hour for this program is different than the other program. So if you don't have a guide to kind of funnel them there, so I think whether it be blogs or program guides or quizzes or pillar pages, all of these various mechanisms to give students more information, that actually, and it's harder to measure, unfortunately, but it actually will alleviate some time that your staff has to spend on all of those things. It also is operating for you kind of behind the scenes. Once you get that foundation, we always look at, like when we work with a new inbound client, that first year is a lot of building. It's just building blogs, building guides. We're getting the foundation built. And with SEO especially, that's a long-term play. That's not like, oh, I said it today and tomorrow I start ranking in Google number 3. That's over time. I just looked at one this morning where we have an average of 5,000 people a month coming to their blog, and they had none as of 3 years ago. So you went from nothing to now 5,000 people organically coming to your site. That's not traffic we're paying for. We're not doing ads for those groups. That's just people finding us organically. So having organic opportunities that drive a lot of traffic to your site, and then having pathways, the web that I was talking about, that you're connecting to all these other things, now all of a sudden they're self-serving 90% of the stuff that they would be asking your staff about. Now we know when they engage with staff, that's high value and they're more likely to yield and all of that. But if you can get them 90% of the way there, the thing I love about inbound is it's so focused on fit, finding the right fit student for the right fit institution and program. And they can get a lot of that stuff if you build it right on the front end before they've ever had to engage with you. And let's face it, most of this generation doesn't want to talk, the younger generations anyway, doesn't want to talk to somebody immediately. And I think a lot of us meet sales with skepticism. I think we're just kind of like, oh, I don't want to be pushed, I don't want to go to the used car dealership today. And the reality is of it, inbound inherently, as you pointed out, is about helping students, giving them good quality information and valuable resources as they're searching. So if you've done that right, that whole ecosystem is working. And then they read through all this stuff and they might have 20 touch points with content before they ever request more information or ever talk to a staff member. And those schools that traditionally just sit there and wait for a student to go, I'm interested, their students are doing all these other things over here. And if you don't have an inbound program, they're going to Reddit. They're going to Google. They're going to Facebook. They're asking their friends. They're getting all sorts of information which may or may not be accurate about your school. And especially if you've had one student that poisons the well on Reddit, all of a sudden you have a recruitment problem But if you have a really good inbound foundation with all this good content, that helps mitigate some of the risk of students seeking other resources for information.
So the good point to reinforce here is if you do this foundation right, if you set up the flows, the great information that's posted on your website, it can keep working for you, right? It's not something that stops. It's not like advertising. You stop paying and then your ads are not showing up. With inbound marketing, it continues working for you. Yes, you might have to go back and maybe edit some information, adjust some guides, but in general, it should continue driving traffic and serving you and your institution and your students.
Yeah, and we have, just as an example, so let's say we build for a client 4 premium guides. So think of ebooks, okay? So we might say we're going to build a view book that's about a whole school, and then we build a couple of program-specific guides, and then we have an application checklist. So let's say those are our 4 premium content offers. We would create the view book, let's say first, and we would advertise that for like 2 months. So we would take a small budget and we would just allocate that to typically Meta and Google search. And so we just blitz ads out there. Download our view book to Gateway Community College. So they're not a client. I'm just, I'm just using them. And Gateway's getting all sorts of free pub out of this. So all right. So you can go to Gateway and you go to the landing page, download a view book. Great. So that's there. Now, if the landing page, if you do it right with the landing page and maybe some supporting blogs, because we're also using topic clusters, which might be something you all have talked about. But let's say the kind of graduate or the school at Gateway, associate's education at Gateway. You then might write 3 blogs related to that. Then you have the guide, and some of the blogs might come from content in the guide. So when you think about your own staff developing this stuff internally without a vendor, think about like we develop a thing, and then can we take snippets of that and make other resources with them? So blogs, for example, or email communications. So you have all these things that kind of fill the gaps there. So you advertise that for 2 months. You drive a lot of traffic there. Now Google's seeing, there's a lot of people going to this landing page, right? So you start getting some ranking authority just from that landing page. And hopefully you've optimized it for keywords. Maybe you have some blogs. So they're all feeding that landing page. So that looks like good authority. All of a sudden, there's this thing that looks really valuable now. So after 2 months, we take our foot off the gas. We don't pay for ads beyond a couple of months usually. We might do a little bit of ads here and there, but we don't have to keep feeding that animal. We can just feed it for a little while, and then the SEO just kind of takes over. So we would do that then and multiply that across the other 3 premium content pieces I mentioned, those 2 program guides and the app checklist. So they all get maybe 2 months of FaceTime, paid FaceTime. And all these things then all of a sudden have organic awareness, and they can just keep feeding over time. Now, part of our process will be usually 2 or 3 months in, or 2 or 3 years in rather. We would go in and maybe refresh one of those guides, maybe optimize it with new keywords, tweak some graphics, that kind of stuff. And then maybe we'd do another paid campaign to it to just kind of refresh and get some good new traffic to it. But otherwise, these things, you now take 4 over that year. Well, then in year 2, we build another 4, and then we build another 4. Now you've got 12 or 16 pieces that are all organically just doing their own thing. And then because of the communications that we provide after you download it, the blogs that you might have read that led you to the guide and so on, they're all cross-linking to each other and getting other organic awareness. So now a student might have seen 3 guides before they've ever inquired, and none of that required your staff team beyond building it to do any work for it. So that organic engine just churns in the background. It's a really great model.
Yeah. Sounds like it is. Well, I know it is. I've done a lot of it in my previous jobs and tried a couple of different guides at my current institution. But there's so much to talk about. I have so many questions still, but we are out of time. And I want to thank you, Marcus, for very insightful conversation. I hope our listeners found it useful and maybe it sparked some ideas, and maybe they'll go ahead and try ChatGPT and see what comes up, and maybe they'll create their own guide and see how that performs. So I think you provided a lot of great ideas. So I appreciate it. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable. Let's keep this conversation going on LinkedIn at Maya Demishkevich. I would love to hear your thoughts, questions, and suggestions for what you'd like to see next on this podcast. Remember, by tuning in to The Hidden Gem, you're not just listening to a podcast. You are joining a movement of amplifying community colleges' success. Don't miss out. Subscribe to this podcast and notifications about our future episodes. Share it with your colleagues and college leaders to help make our colleges stand out. Together, let's make an impact. The Hidden Gem is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you will like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher education technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Jenny Fowler, Eddie Francis, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.